It had been a quiet evening. The sort of evening where everything felt peaceful, normal, almost too normal. Amy sat at the kitchen table, her hands cradling a cup of tea that had long since cooled. Her mind wasn't on the tea, though. Her mind was on her husband, Daniel, who had just come home late again. The clock on the wall ticked away, each second feeling longer than the one before. Amy tried to tell herself she was being paranoid. It had been months since Daniel's long hours had become a common occurrence, and yet the suspicion still gnawed at her, a constant itch in the back of her mind. She had tried to ignore it at first, to pretend that everything was fine. After all, they had a perfect life, didn't they? A beautiful home, stable careers, and a daughter they both adored. But something in Daniel's eyes had changed over the past few weeks. Something distant, something off. And the late nights, the unexplained texts, the sudden trips for work. It all added up to a dark, twisted picture that Amy couldn't avoid any longer. She hadn't confronted him yet. She wasn't sure why. Maybe it was fear. Fear of what she might discover. Fear of destroying the life they had built together. Or maybe it was something deeper. A gut feeling telling her that she wasn't ready to know the truth. But tonight, as she sat alone in the kitchen, the decision came crashing down on her. Amy stood up from the table, her legs shaky but resolute. She walked to the bedroom where Daniel had just retreated, slipping into his usual spot on the bed, scrolling through his phone, pretending not to notice her as she entered. She was done pretending. "Daniel," she said softly, her voice trembling. He looked up, his eyes widening slightly as if caught off guard. "Hey, Amy. You're still awake." "I need to talk to you," she replied, her words heavy with the weight of everything she had been holding in. She moved toward him slowly, each step carrying the feeling of finality, as though this conversation would change everything. He sat up, putting his phone down beside him. "Of course, what's going on?" Amy took a deep breath. "I've noticed something's been off lately. You've been distant. You're always gone late, and when you're here, you're not really here. Is there something you need to tell me?" For a moment, Daniel didn't answer. He looked away, his fingers twitching as though he was trying to find the right words. Amy's heart pounded in her chest, and she fought the urge to reach out and shake the answers out of him. Finally Daniel spoke, his voice tight. "I'm just tired, Amy. Work's been stressful, you know that. You're overthinking this." But Amy knew. She knew that wasn't the whole truth. "Who's she, Daniel?" Her voice cracked, the words slipping out before she could stop them. His face paled slightly, and for the briefest of moments, there was a flicker in his eyes. Something that might have been guilt. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by a coldness that chilled Amy to the core. "Who's who?" he asked, his tone defensive. "The woman you've been seeing. I know something's going on. You can't hide it from me anymore." For a moment they sat in silence, the tension between them thick and suffocating. Amy waited for him to deny it, to tell her she was wrong, to promise that everything would be okay. But that didn't come. Instead, Daniel stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor with a screech that sent a shiver down her spine. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice rising in anger. "I'm not seeing anyone, Amy. You're imagining things." But Amy wasn't imagining things. The evidence was there. Hidden in the late nights, the whispers on the phone, the strange scent of perfume that clung to his shirt. But there was something more, something that Amy couldn't quite explain. A feeling of dread that had settled deep in her chest, like a cold hand squeezing her heart. "Then why are you lying to me?" she demanded, her voice growing more desperate. Daniel's eyes narrowed, his jaw clenching as if he was fighting to keep his composure. "I'm not lying," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But you need to leave it alone, Amy. For your own sake." Amy took a step forward, refusing to back down. "What does that mean? What's going on, Daniel?" Before he could respond, a sudden sharp knock echoed through the front door. It was loud, jarring, and completely out of place in the stillness of the night. Amy froze, her heart skipping a beat. The knock came again, louder this time. Daniel's face turned pale, and for a split second, his eyes darted toward the door as though he knew who, or what, was on the other side. He didn't speak, but his body stiffened, as though he was preparing to flee. "What's happening, Daniel?" Amy whispered, her voice trembling with fear now. But before he could answer, the door creaked open on its own. The room grew cold in an instant. The light from the hallway flickered, casting long, twisting shadows on the walls. Amy's breath caught in her throat as she saw the figure standing in the doorway. A woman. She was tall, her long hair dark and flowing like a shadow. She stood motionless in the doorway, her eyes locked on Daniel. There was something unsettling about her, something wrong. Her face was pale, her skin almost translucent, as though she wasn't entirely real. And the look in her eyes, it was a look of malice, of something ancient and dark. "Amy, this is her," Daniel said, his voice barely a whisper. Amy's heart sank. The woman stepped forward, her presence like a weight pressing down on the air, suffocating her. She was cold, too cold, and as she walked toward Amy, the temperature in the room dropped even further, until Amy could see her breath hanging in the air. "This is her," Daniel repeated, his voice shaking now, as if the truth was spilling out of him, unwillingly. Amy didn't know what to do. She wanted to scream, to run, to escape from the nightmare unfolding before her. But she was paralyzed, trapped in the dark, in the presence of a woman who was far more than she seemed. The woman, no, whatever she was, smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was a grin, twisted and wicked, as though she took delight in Amy's fear. "Do you want to know the truth?" she asked, her voice soft but laced with something darker, something sinister. Amy's blood ran cold. She wanted to turn away, to leave, but she couldn't move. It was as though the woman's gaze had frozen her in place, holding her captive. "I can tell you everything," the woman continued. "But be warned, Amy. The truth you seek may be more than you can bear." Amy's breath quickened as she stood frozen in place, staring at the woman in the doorway. The air in the room was thick, suffocating, as though it was alive with a dark, pulsing energy. Her heart hammered in her chest, each beat echoing louder than the silence that filled the room. She wanted to scream, to run, but her body wouldn't obey. It was as though the woman's presence had ensnared her in an invisible grip, paralyzing her with fear. The woman, who Amy now understood wasn't entirely human, took a slow step forward, her bare feet making no sound as they glided across the floor. Her long black hair cascaded over her shoulders like a shadow, and her pale skin glowed eerily in the dim light. Her smile, though small, was enough to send a wave of terror crashing through Amy's body. "Do you want to know the truth, Amy?" the woman asked again, her voice like silk, but edged with a chilling undertone. "Do you want to understand what's been happening to your husband?" Daniel stood off to the side, staring at the woman with a mixture of fear and resignation. His hands trembled at his sides, and he didn't make a move to intervene. Amy could see the look on his face. He was terrified, not of the woman, but of the truth she carried. It was clear that this was a story he hadn't wanted Amy to hear, a story he had hoped would stay buried in the shadows. But now, the woman had dragged it into the light, and there was no escaping it. "I don't understand," Amy said, her voice trembling. "Who are you? What do you want with us?" The woman's smile widened, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too white, to belong to any human being. "I am not what you think I am, Amy. But I am part of your husband's secret. The one he's been hiding from you all this time. He thinks he can escape from me, but he can't. No one ever escapes me." Amy's stomach twisted in knots. Her mind raced, trying to piece together the fragmented thoughts and emotions swirling inside her. She had known something was wrong. She had known that Daniel's behavior was too strange, too erratic. But she hadn't imagined this. She hadn't imagined anything like this. "What do you mean?" Amy whispered, her voice barely audible. The woman took another step forward, her icy presence seeping into Amy's skin. "Daniel has made a pact. Pact with me. And the price is always higher than they expect." Amy's eyes darted to Daniel. "A pact. What do you mean, Daniel? What is she talking about? Daniel's face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. The woman didn't give him the chance to speak. She glided closer to Amy, her eyes gleaming with something ancient, something predatory. Your husband thought he could use me for his own benefit. He thought he could escape the consequences. But when you make a deal with the darkness, it always comes back to collect, she said, her voice darkening with each word. And now, Amy, you are part of the deal. Amy's blood ran cold at the implication. She took a step back, her heart pounding in her chest. What do you mean I'm part of it? What have you done to me? The woman's smile widened even further, almost as if she were savoring Amy's growing horror. You see, Amy, the truth is much darker than you realize. When your husband made his pact with me, he didn't just seal his fate. He sealed yours as well. Everything he's done, every lie he's told, every betrayal he's committed, has led us here. To this moment. Amy's mind reeled. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The weight of the woman's words pressed down on her like an unrelenting force, crushing her chest. The room seemed to close in around her, the walls narrowing, suffocating her. Your husband may have thought he could control me, the woman continued, but I don't play by human rules. I make no bargains unless they are to my advantage. And now, Amy, you will see what happens when someone crosses me. Amy's eyes darted to Daniel, her heart breaking. How could he have done this to them? How could he have allowed this woman, whatever she was, into their lives? But as her gaze lingered on his face, she saw something that made her blood run cold. He wasn't just afraid. He was terrified. Terrified of the woman, yes, but also terrified of something else. Something he hadn't told her. Something that had been hidden in the darkest corners of their lives. The woman's laugh echoed in the room, low and unsettling. You're not going to like what happens next, Amy. But it's too late to turn back now. The pact is already sealed. Amy's heart hammered in her chest, and she took another step back. No, I won't let you. Whatever you are, whatever you want from us, I won't let you have it. But the woman's eyes glinted with something cruel and knowing. You don't have a choice, Amy. You've already been marked. You were marked the moment you stood here in this room, asking for the truth. And now the truth is coming for you. Amy felt the ground beneath her feet shift, the room spinning as if it were alive with energy, dark and twisted. She tried to move, tried to run, but her legs wouldn't obey. She was trapped. Trapped in the dark, in this nightmare that she couldn't escape. The woman stepped forward again, her icy breath brushing against Amy's face, sending a shiver down her spine. You'll find out soon enough, Amy. The truth always finds a way to reveal itself. And when it does, there's no turning back. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the temperature in the room plummeted. Amy could see her breath now, a thin mist hanging in the air. The woman's face twisted, her features distorting in a grotesque way as though she was no longer entirely human, but something far worse. Something ancient and evil. And then, just as quickly as it had all started, the woman was gone. Disappeared into the shadows. The room returned to its oppressive silence. Amy stood there, trembling, her mind struggling to comprehend what had just happened. She turned to Daniel, who was still standing motionless, his face drained of color. He looked like a man on the edge of collapse. What have you done? Amy whispered, her voice barely audible. Daniel's eyes filled with tears as he fell to his knees, his hands shaking. I never meant for any of this to happen, Amy. I never meant to drag you into this. But I couldn't get out. She won't let me go. And now she's after you too. Amy's mind raced. Everything she had believed about her life, about her marriage, was crumbling. The man she loved, the man she had trusted, had been hiding a dark secret, one that had bound them both to something far beyond their understanding. And now it was coming for her. What do we do now? She whispered, her voice breaking. But Daniel didn't answer. He just sat there, his head bowed, his face filled with despair. He had sealed their fate the moment he had made the pact, and now they were all trapped in the dark. And the darkness was closing in. The house was eerily quiet now, the silence heavy and oppressive, wrapping around Amy like a suffocating blanket. The woman, if she could even be called that, was gone, but the chilling sensation she left behind remained. Every corner of the house seemed to harbor a presence, a watchful eye waiting for the next moment to strike. Amy's mind was reeling from everything that had happened, but the one question that echoed in her head was the same, relentless. What did Daniel get them into? She glanced at him, sitting on the floor, his hands trembling. The look of fear in his eyes was something she had never seen before, not from him. He was a man who had always prided himself on being in control, on being the one who could fix everything. But now all of that was gone. There was no fixing this. No way to undo the pact that had bound them to the darkness. Amy took a step forward, her legs feeling heavy as if the very air was resisting her movement. Daniel, what did she mean? What's happening to us? Daniel looked up at her, his eyes wide with guilt and terror. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. His face contorted, his features twisted with inner turmoil, and for a moment, Amy thought he might break down completely. But then he seemed to gather himself, his eyes growing distant as if he were retreating into himself, unable to face her, unable to face what he had done. "I didn't want this," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I thought I could control it. I thought I could stop it." Amy's heart ached as she knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she reached out to him. "Stop what, Daniel? Please, I need to understand." He shook his head, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. "It started a year ago. I didn't know who she was at first. She came to me with an offer. She said she could make all my problems go away. Financial problems, work problems, everything. She promised me power, influence, everything I ever wanted. But there was a price. A price I didn't understand." Amy's stomach churned as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. "The affair," she said, the realization dawning on her. "That's why you were distant. You were involved with her." Daniel nodded slowly, his eyes haunted. "I didn't know what I was getting into. At first I thought she was just a woman, a mistake, but it wasn't just an affair, Amy. She's not human. She never was." Amy recoiled slightly, feeling the weight of his words like a slap to the face. "What do you mean, she's not human? What is she, then?" Daniel looked up at her, his eyes wide with terror, as if the truth he was about to say was too much to bear. "She's a demon, creature from the darkness. She doesn't just take your soul, she makes a deal with you. She gives you what you want, but she takes something from you in return. And once you're in, there's no way out. You can't run from her, Amy. You can't escape what she's done." The room seemed to shrink around them, the shadows lengthening, stretching across the walls as if they were alive. The air grew colder, and Amy could feel a low hum beneath her feet, as though the house itself was trembling in anticipation. She could hear something now, faint whispers that seemed to drift from the walls, the ceiling, everywhere. "Daniel," Amy whispered, her voice trembling. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you warn me?" "I didn't know how," he replied, his voice breaking. "I didn't want to drag you into it. I thought I could fix it before it got too far, but the moment I made that first mistake, when I slept with her, it was already too late. Became hers. I didn't know what she really was until it was too late." Amy's mind reeled, the weight of his confession sinking deep into her chest like a stone. The life she thought she had, the safety she had believed in, was all a lie. Daniel wasn't just her husband. He was a man who had sold his soul to a being far beyond their understanding. And now that being was coming for them both. Suddenly, the whispers grew louder, more distinct. Amy's breath hitched in her throat as she realized they were coming from behind her. She turned, but there was nothing there. The room was empty, save for her and Daniel. But still, the whispers persisted, echoing in her mind, seeping into the walls. "Do you hear that?" Amy asked, her voice rising in panic. Daniel's face went pale, his eyes widening in fear. She's here. She's always been here. Before Amy could respond, the door slammed shut behind them with a deafening crash. She spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. The shadows in the room seemed to thicken, swirling like smoke, and the temperature dropped even further. Her breath came out in visible clouds, freezing in the air as she struggled to process what was happening. And then, through the thick darkness, she saw it. The woman, or whatever she was, appeared in the doorway once more, her form barely visible at first, like a dark silhouette in the shadows. But as she stepped forward, Amy could see her more clearly now. Her skin was deathly pale, her eyes black as coal, void of any light, and her smile stretched unnaturally wide, her lips curling back to reveal rows of sharp, jagged teeth. "No!" Amy cried, stepping back in fear. "Stay away from me." The woman didn't answer. Instead, she moved closer, her footsteps silent, but her presence overwhelming. She didn't need to speak. Her very being exuded a cold, oppressive power that seemed to drain the warmth from the room. As she drew near, Amy could feel the darkness pressing against her, closing in from all sides. It was suffocating and she could hardly breathe. "You can't run from me, Amy," the woman said, her voice like a soft caress, but the malice in it was unmistakable. "You've already made your choice. And now you belong to me." Amy's legs wobbled beneath her, and she stumbled back, desperately searching for an escape. She had to get out. She had to save herself and her family. But there was nowhere to run. The door was locked, the windows barred, trapped in this nightmare with no way to escape. "No!" Amy screamed, her voice breaking. "Please! I don't want any part of this." The woman laughed, a sound like the scraping of metal against stone. "It's too late for that, dear. You should have never asked for the truth. And now you'll pay the price." Amy's eyes darted to Daniel, who was frozen in place, his face contorted with terror. He was no longer the man she had married. The man standing before her was a broken shell, haunted by the deal he had made. And as the woman's form loomed closer, Amy realized there was nothing Daniel could do to save her. "I can't fight this," Daniel whispered, his voice cracking. "None of us can." Amy's heart pounded in her chest as the woman's hand reached out, her cold fingers brushing against her skin. A wave of ice shot through Amy's body, and she gasped, her vision blurring. The woman's touch burned like frostbite, seeping into her bones, freezing her from the inside out. And then, as if the very air had been sucked from the room, the lights flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. Amy couldn't see. She couldn't breathe. All she could hear was the woman's voice, faint but growing louder, echoing in her mind. "You're mine now," the woman whispered. Amy awoke in darkness. The kind of darkness that wasn't just the absence of light, but something thicker, more oppressive. It pressed down on her from every direction, suffocating her, wrapping itself around her like an invisible shroud. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, and for a moment she wasn't sure if she was still alive. Then, with a violent gasp, she drew in a breath, her lungs burning as air rushed in. She coughed, her throat dry and raw. The coldness of the air bit into her skin like ice. But she couldn't see anything, not even the outline of her own hands in front of her face. The world around her was a void, a suffocating abyss. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice shaky, but the word felt like a lifeline in the void. "Daniel, where are you?" Her heart thudded in her chest as she struggled to push herself up. Her body felt heavy, sluggish, as though it were no longer her own. She felt disoriented, lost in this vast, inescapable blackness. "Daniel," she called again, more urgently this time, her voice echoing in the empty space. But there was no response. No sound other than her own voice, bouncing off the walls of the dark. It was as if the house, the world itself, had swallowed them whole. The coldness around her intensified, until it felt like she was standing in the heart of a blizzard. Her teeth chattered uncontrollably as she wrapped her arms around herself, trying to fend off the biting chill. She needed to move. She needed to find Daniel. But every direction felt wrong, every step heavier than the last. And then, from somewhere far off, she heard a faint whisper. It was soft at first, so soft that she wasn't sure if it was real. But it grew louder, closer, until it was unmistakable. A voice, low and mocking. "Did you think you could escape?" Me froze. The voice was familiar. It was the woman's voice. The one who had come for them. The one who had made the pact with Daniel. "You're trapped, Amy. You have always been trapped." Amy's blood ran cold. The air around her seemed to shift, as if something were moving in the shadows, watching her, waiting. The whispering voice filled her mind, its words crawling through her thoughts like fingers dragging through wet sand. "I gave him everything he wanted," the woman continued, her voice a cruel lullaby. "Power, wealth, control. And all he had to do was surrender his soul to me. But you..." The voice paused, lingering in the silence. "You were never supposed to be part of this. You were never supposed to be caught in my web." Amy's chest tightened as she realized the truth. The woman had always known about her. She had always known that Amy would eventually find out. The pact had never just been about Daniel. She had been watching them both, weaving her threads into their lives long before Amy had suspected anything. And now, the woman was playing her final game. Amy's mind spun as she staggered forward through the darkness. She couldn't just stand there, not with the woman's voice growing louder in her head. She had to escape, had to find a way out of this nightmare. "Please," she whispered almost to herself. "I need to get out." The temperature around her dropped even further, and Amy felt a creeping sensation crawling up her spine. It was as though the shadows themselves were alive, reaching out to touch her, to drag her back into the darkness. She could feel them slithering beneath her feet, wrapping around her ankles, pulling at her every step. And then, without warning, the silence shattered. A loud crash rang out from somewhere in the distance, like glass shattering, followed by a sound that made her blood run cold, a deep, guttural growl. Amy's breath hitched in her throat. It was coming for her. It was real. The thing that had haunted her life, that had been waiting in the shadows, was finally showing itself. She broke into a run, stumbling in the pitch blackness, her mind screaming for her to move faster, to get away from the growl, from whatever it was that was chasing her. Her legs burned as she pushed herself forward, the ground beneath her feet shifting, uneven, as though it were alive with malice. The whispering voice, sweet and taunting, followed her every step. "You can't run from me, Amy," it purred. "You can't hide from the truth." Suddenly, a pale light flickered to life in front of her. It was dim at first, barely visible, but it grew brighter with every step she took. Amy squinted against the light, her heart pounding as she tried to make sense of it. And then, as the light grew clearer, she saw it. Door. A wooden door, old and weathered, standing at the end of a long, dark hallway. The light came from beneath it, casting a faint glow that illuminated the dark corridor she was running through. It was the only thing in this place that seemed real. The only thing that felt like it could lead her out of this nightmare. With no time to waste, Amy reached the door and yanked it open. But as the door swung wide, she was met with something far worse than she could have ever imagined. On the other side of the door wasn't the outside world. It wasn't freedom. What she saw was worse, much worse. The room beyond the door was a twisted, nightmarish version of her own home. The walls were warped, the ceilings caving in, and the floor covered in cracks that pulsed with a sickly green light. The air was thick with the stench of decay and something else, something metallic like blood. But what truly terrified her were the figures standing in the middle of the room. Daniel. But he wasn't Daniel anymore. His eyes were black, voids of emptiness, and his mouth was twisted into a grotesque grin. His skin a sickly pale gray, stretched tight over his bones. He was standing next to the woman, the creature, the one who had started all of this. She was no longer the woman Amy had seen before. Now she was something else entirely. Her form was shifting, contorting, her limbs elongating, her features becoming grotesque and monstrous. "You wanted the truth, Amy," the woman's voice echoed, her mouth stretching unnaturally wide as she spoke. Well, here it is. The truth is that you're already dead. All of you. Amy staggered back, her mind reeling, unable to comprehend what she was seeing. This was it. This was the end. She had come so far, but it was all for nothing. Daniel, she screamed, her voice breaking. Please. Tell me this isn't real. But Daniel didn't respond. He just stood there, staring at her with empty eyes, his form swaying as if caught in a trance. The woman laughed, a low, guttural sound that made Amy's blood run cold. It's too late for him, Amy. And soon it will be too late for you as well. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind her, trapping her inside this nightmare with no escape. The walls seemed to close in, and Amy's world went dark once more. Amy awoke again, but this time the darkness felt different. It wasn't the oppressive black void that had surrounded her before. No, this was a more subtle kind of darkness, deep and suffocating, yet oddly familiar. It felt as though she was submerged in a heavy fog, as though her very consciousness was slipping in and out of reality. She tried to move, but her body refused to obey her. Her limbs felt like lead, and her head spun, as if the world around her were spinning faster than she could comprehend. The faint metallic taste of blood lingered on her tongue, and she could feel the thick, choking presence of something ancient and malevolent pushing against her chest, forcing the air from her lungs. Daniel, she whispered, her voice hoarse, barely a sound at all. She struggled to sit up, but the weight of her own body pressed her back down, trapping her in place. For a moment, she thought she might suffocate in the endless blackness, but then a soft light flickered in front of her, distant and warm. Amy's heart raced. It was the door again, the same wooden door from before, standing just beyond the fog, waiting for her to find the strength to reach it. She couldn't understand how, but the door seemed to pull at her, urging her to get up, to escape whatever nightmare had trapped her. With a great effort, she managed to sit up, her body trembling with exhaustion and fear. Her vision swam in and out of focus, and the light from the door seemed to waver like a mirage, flickering in and out of existence. But she had to move. She had to get to that door. Daniel, she muttered again, desperation creeping into. With every step she took toward the door, the darkness seemed to stretch out further, trying to swallow her forward, ignoring the voices whispering from all sides, urging her to turn back. She reached the door and pressed her hand against it, the wood cold to the touch. Her heart thudded in her chest as she grasped the handle and turned it. The door creaked open, and a blast of cold air rushed toward her, carrying with it a putrid stench that nearly made her gag. She recoiled, but then something inside her, something deep within her gut, urged her.